Summer 2015, we were in a small office.
我认识他的时候，他只有19岁。
就惊为天人。
I'm sure he gets mobbed by people everywhere.
Wanted to just make it easier for people in general to build decentralized applications.
So anything that you can imagine happening on the World Wide Web can and will soon be able to happen on Ethereum.
以太坊，我觉得应该有60%的因素可能是因为 ICO 带动了大家对它的认知。
I was fortunate to give some people their first Bitcoin. I gave Richard Branson a Bitcoin. I gave Bill Clinton his first Bitcoin. I even gave Princess Buttercup her first Bitcoin. I asked Bill Clinton, have you heard of Bitcoin? Do you have any? He's like, no. And I'm like, well, I'd like to give you your first Bitcoin. His face lit up. I don't think he was expecting that.
Where are you going?
It's 135 West, 42nd between Broadway and 6th. Yeah, that's a restaurant called Oriel. We are on our way to a Chamber of Digital Commerce hosted event. A lot of people are in town. Always great to get together and grab a cocktail and talk crypto. Okay, let's do something fun. Come on.
I'd like to introduce Matt Rozak from Block.
The one thing I was fortunate to do was start developing these dinners, these originally Bitcoin supper clubs, blockchain supper clubs, where at these conferences.
Whose first blockchain supper club is this? Okay, awesome. And who's been to one before? Let's see a round of applause here. Awesome.
Let's get 20, 30 CEOs, entrepreneurs, technologists around the table, and through that, built some amazing friendships. Learned a ton, invested in deals, hired people, built partnerships, and 50 plus dinners later, I look back at that and building out that network of relationships still is one of the most valuable things that I have.
Seriously? All right, okay, very good. Are you ready?
I am a first-generation Polish American. My mother, she was actually born on a train on the way to Siberia during the war. She grew up in Siberia for 3 years, which is, it makes you think like you never have a hard day in your life. She's been running businesses her whole life, and she went through, gave me a different appetite for risk.
Risk-taking is probably the most prominent genetic trait of investors. All of the blockchain investors we have met on the journey are adventurous in some way. Some are contemplating how to launch a world-class technological innovation. Some are anxious that they might miss the internet's next big thing. Others are cautiously watching every move of the market. Matthew Rozak is one of the adventurous ones.
I was like, let's look at Bitcoin. And then my co-founder's brother was actually, I call him a hippie hacker. But he was
By 2012, I was getting into the ecosystem. And it was still relatively raw and kind of uncharted territory. And so started investing in a lot of the bridges, roads, and tunnels of Bitcoin and blockchain. Processors, exchanges, miners, software layers.
At the beginning of 2018, Forbes published the world's first crypto rich ranking. Matthew Rozak came in 5th, setting foot in the Crypto Billionaire Club.
I can't find anything that's more interesting than the stuff that we're doing and building.
Continuing our fascinating blockchain journey with Bianca Chen, an experienced financial reporter who has traveled around the world to unravel the mysteries of this intriguing decentralized technology. We will be exploring stories that not only tell us about technology and finance, but also the human interest behind these fearless scientists, financiers, entrepreneurs, educators, and other industry experts. 2017 was probably the craziest year for blockchain. The year witnessed the price of Bitcoin skyrocketing to nearly $20,000 US. And it also witnessed the rise of a new fundraising method, ICO, or initial coin offering.
One of the first killer applications of blockchain is this new funding tool that has been since called an ICO.
This year, I think early stage companies raised more money through ICO than
venture capital.
Do you feel scared?
Fantastic.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness.
People would try to buy and invest in ICOs for the expectation of a high return. Can they get it?
This is Next Blockchain.
Good morning. My name is Matthew Rozak. I am the co-founder of Block, along with Jeff Garzik. And Jeff is a technologist. Me, as at the time, I was an investor in over 20 companies in this ecosystem. So when Jeff and I got together, I was like, hey, I don't want to, spray paint another, 20 bets in the space. I want to build something.
And he said, what's the biggest opportunity in the entire space? And I was asking myself the same question. And we both came to the same conclusion.
Trying to build something that has new utility, new use cases, and is just a better crypto.
Today, we're proud to announce, next slide, that the initial supply auction is going to start midnight UTC on June 18th. We are finally ready to release it to the public.
它的第一个 ICO 是 Mastercoin，
对 Mastercoin，
万事达币，历史上第一个 ICO。
当时我们没有 ICO 的概念。
You wanted to be a part of it.
今天那个币还在，还活着。
我到现在还没去拿那个万事达币呢，因为我只投了一个，我也不在意，但是我把名分占了。
对对对，有我一股。
J.R. Willett is a software engineer. In January 2012, he published the so-called The Second Bitcoin white paper on the Bitcoin Talk forum, in which he proposed building a new protocol layer on top of Bitcoin, opening the gates to new cryptocurrencies. The paper didn't gain much attention back then. It was not until July 2013, when he launched the first ever initial coin offering, that he truly caused a sensation in the space, and the world's first ICO was born, Mastercoin.
I got into mining in 2011. Once mining became a little less profitable, I started casting around for how can I get involved in a more deep way. And I started writing a paper about how to build on top of the Bitcoin blockchain and what new features we could add on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. That white paper was released in the beginning of 2012, and it described how to do the first ICO.
Did you have the name ICO in the white paper?
No, I was not that stupid. That I think it's asking for the SEC to come kick down your door kind of name. Mm-hmm. I called it a bootstrapping mechanism. I said, we can pay for our own development of this protocol if we sell the tokens in advance. And I wanted someone else to do it. I desperately wanted someone else to do it. I've been telling people this for at least a year now. I've been saying, because I want to invest in it. I don't have a ton of coins, but that's where I want to invest my coins. And I have yet to find somebody who wants my coins. Does anybody in this room want my Bitcoins? I tried for 18 months. I was haranguing people on the Bitcoin forums. I finally gave up and decided to do the first one myself. That was 18 months later, though, summer of 2013. And that became Mastercoin, which was later renamed to Omni. We're going to make a new protocol layer. It's going to have new features X, Y, and Z on top of Bitcoin. and here's who we are, and here's our plan, and here's our Bitcoin address, and anybody who sends coins to this address owns a piece of our new protocol. Anybody can do that.
What kind of reaction did you receive?
Incredulity and excitement. I posted an address online. It was just me on a forum saying, hey, here's my white paper, here's my Bitcoin address. If you like what I'm doing, you could send Bitcoin and you'll own a piece of what I'm building. It was that simple. Random strangers on the Bitcoin forum sent me Bitcoin. And I set up an address, and $500,000 worth of Bitcoins at that time came in. And I was like, okay, I guess this is happening. So.
Yeah.
With a white paper and a Bitcoin address, JR soon raised $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. The geeks on the Bitcoin forum became the investors and token holders of Mastercoin.
So people give you Bitcoin, then you will issue Mastercoin to them.
And in fact, at the time that I did the issuance, I just said, what we'll do is we'll just look at who sent Bitcoin and we'll credit you with Mastercoin or Omni once we build all the stuff that will recognize it.
The then Mastercoin crowd sale was still just a party within a small group of geeks. It was not until the emergence of Ethereum that ICO became a real chapter in the cryptocurrency story.
I mean, the model was emerging, certainly in 2014 with Ethereum.
And in 2011, 2012, people would photocopy Bitcoin, spin up their own Litecoin or Dogecoin or something like that. But you had to do all this node work, you had to do all this mining work, all this stuff. What Ethereum did, and why this is Ethereum's killer app, is they created one smart contract that lets you have a token. And once you create that piece of software, I can have a token, you can have a token. And it's just a couple keystrokes on your mobile phone. So that made it so simple to create your own ledger on top of Ethereum's ledger. You didn't have to do all this software work.
It starts with a bunch of investors, right? So you have multiple investors. They will give you Ether. They would send this money into a smart contract. You send in Ether, and this smart contract will mint basically a token, right? So this token is basically a representation of how many assets you hold. So this Ether actually gets released to either the ICO team directly. What happens typically is that this money goes to like a financial institution or a broker that would exchange them for fiat money. For example, Swiss francs or US dollars in traditional terms.
Ethereum is what brought ICOs into the crypto mainstream. The ERC-20 smart contract standard that was released on November 19, 2015, increased the popularity of ICOs and made them easier to launch. The latest available information shows that out of the current 100 ICO projects with the highest market value, 92 were issued through the ERC-20 standard on the Ethereum blockchain.
You can look at the rise of the ICO and the rise of the ERC-20 smart contract are correlated exactly the same, right there in late 2015, early 2016.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Bianca. Okay.
在2014年5月份，我发起了一个项目，就中国第一个区块链项目，我当时命名它叫小蚁。我跟当时主流的中国的一些天使投资人也都聊过，但他们觉得都看不太懂，因为你这个都没有公司结构，对吧？也没有什么 revenue， 对吧？更没有谈什么收益嘛，更没有谈这些。最后我跟团队讨论了一下，就是说，我说，如果我们觉得这可能是一个未来的方向，就我们自己来众筹嘛。这也是我们说中国第一次这个我们说叫 ICO 或者叫 token sale， 参与的人数最早应该是不超过15个人，最终我们凑了大概有一个60万人民币，大概在10万美金这样的一个规模。当时的话，我们想做这个事情并不是 单纯的为了赚钱，因为当时是没有人来支持我们，没有人愿意来支持我们。
后来就是等于是因为这60万 take off 了。
对。
A year ago, if you were a company and you wanted to raise money to start a business, you went to venture capitalists, you went to investment banks, and they were the arbiters and the intermediaries that controlled the purse strings of growth capital. Now it's fundamentally different.
ICOs really are opening up capital inflows from the masses. You no longer have to be a potentially an accredited investor for accessing, like a raise. So traditional forms of capital raise are being disrupted.
Dr. Herman Liu is a senior Silicon Valley venture capitalist. In January 2016, he joined the first tokenized growth fund focused on pre-IPO late-stage technology companies, Andra Capital as managing partner.
区块链带来的这个创新也好哪怕是颠覆也好，其实很像当年的就是说互联网，就是年代中那会儿就是所谓的电子交易平台online trading 线上交易，最早这个门槛是很高的，你要买卖股票在 Schwab 之前的话呢，你去美林去大摩，至少你得有100万美金才能给你开户，是个富人的游戏。那嘉信理财 Charles Schwab 本人他就是我们的创始人，他就觉得理财这个事情应该是每个人都可以做的，都有能力来的那个管理他自己的财富，所以呢门槛应该降得很低，所以他就开创了这个叫做 discount brokerage 拿中文翻译起来叫做平价这个券商，对吧？
你觉得我们是不是也在经历类似于当年这种券商的这种革命呢？
典型的硅谷风险投资就是我们把这个资本投到这个高科技的创业公司里头去，那希望这些公司呢将来变成下一个 Facebook， 下一个优步，下一个滴滴，这就是所有的这个风险投资基金在做的事情。最后到真投进去，一般一个项目至少一般我们来是要3个月。所以这个模式其实也是一个效率很低，而且耗人耗时，
门槛也比较高。
对，门槛又很高。因为硅谷你看那么风生水起的一个生态圈，今天优步，明天那个Airbnb， 那其实真正投到这些公司里头去的风投也就是那么10几家，就是他们就是一个垄断的，就是这个我把它叫做一个私人俱乐部一样的这种生态圈。那我们现在要做的一件什么事情呢？把这个准入门槛降低，让大家那个都能进来。那怎么做这个事情呢？我们就把这些资产把它证券化，通过在区块链上面发这个证券代币。你帮我基金里头投1块钱，我给你发一个代币。你的这个币呢，其实就相当于那个股东的那个合同，你是我基金的一个股东，你拥有我基金的一个份额，同时我就拿你的1块钱，我投到优步里头去呢，你就变成了优步的一个股东，所以呢，你这个币代表的是一个股权。
According to statistics, only 35 projects launched ICOs in 2016. Just a year later, the number of ICO projects skyrocketed to 902.
The amount of money raised this way surpassed traditional venture capital financing in the blockchain world.
Yeah, no, in 2014 I got really interested in at the beginning of 2016 the project was going nowhere, so I had taken a job in robotics.
Arthur would never stop talking about it, and so I had a if you can't beat them, join them moment. I guess like the first thing that we did, Arthur had me
It's one thing to have a white paper, or it's one thing to have an idea, and you have to implement it. I just wanted to say like, hey, I want to see this run, I want to see this work. At the time we were thinking of just, getting a little bit of private money in the US and just, launching it. Around like September of 2016, I visited Switzerland. They proposed a model of a fundraiser with a Swiss nonprofit who would hold a fundraiser and distribute the tokens to the people who contributed to the fundraiser.
And that was the playbook that Ethereum did. And we were super excited when we saw, like, I think the Ethereum fundraiser had like 6,000 wallets created.
I forget.
Yeah. It was some number, it was under 10,000.
Okay.
So we wanted to kind of like have that sort of community built in.
How big is the community by the time?
There's about 40,000 people on the mailing list, 30,000 contributors to the fundraiser. That was very regrettable that it happened.
In late 2017, ICOs reached their climax. On September 4th of that year, China banned all ICO and cryptocurrency transaction activities. ICOs suddenly exited the biggest crypto market in the world. Later, South Korea followed suit. The governments of Japan, Australia, Singapore have all become much more cautious. The SEC and UK's Financial Conduct Authority have also issued risk warnings multiple times.
It's been a rough several weeks.
Yeah. It's a roller coaster. You have to like put on your helmet, put on your gloves, fasten your seatbelt. You need to just, get ready for this ride, because the journey is just starting. About 25 days from today. It'll start, and then 10-day countdown, and then the auctions for 7 days. So it's going to go into March. And now all we're doing is testing, auditing.
Two things. One is building autonomous networks is hard. It needs to be tested and audited extensively. That takes time. Number two is once it launches, the network is ready. The auction is the start and the ignition for the network.
Why do you think it's important to have a product before you just raise money in ICOs?
I think the nature of the market is, there's a lot of money trying to find opportunity in that standpoint.
The pump and dump schemes and the scams and all of the bad acting, that makes me sad because this new promising technology is just being abused by greed.
According to token data, out of the 902 ICO projects launched in 2017, 142 failed before raising enough funds. 276 failed after successfully raising funds. However, either the teams had fallen off the radar or the community had withered away. This means the failure rate among ICOs is close to 50%.
We just have like this Word document with just 1,000 words, and we don't have a product, and we don't have a team, and we don't have anything. But just send us money, and
That would work.
You can have a white paper and a Bitcoin address, and people will send you money.
The cover of Forbes magazine's July 27, 2017 issue describes ICOs as the craziest bubble ever. It said this was the game of how smart people make stupid money off greedy people. So, how is the game played?
So, in the summer of 2016, that's when all of my sources in the crypto space suddenly started talking about what they were calling Wall Street 2.0. They were saying like, hey, we're realizing that there's this thing you can do where you can raise money. At the same time, it solves a business problem, which is if you're trying to build a network, how do you get people to join the network early on? And so they were really excited about the idea that you could kind of like incentivize people to join early by offering this token and saying, hey, like maybe the token will rise in value if the network grows big. And so they were like, oh, it's this weird animal. It's like a crowdfunding mechanism, a way to, build your network. But then as time went on and more people learned about this fundraising mechanism, a lot of opportunists and frankly probably not very what's the word? Not very conscientious people, I guess you could say, decided, oh, hey, I can get people to give me free money with this. And so there were a lot of people that were either perpetrating scams with this mechanism or that maybe weren't so serious about what they were building.
因为我那时候还是学生啦，就那时候把赚了一点点钱，差不多就1万块左右吧。我投了1万块钱。
后来你亏了，大概你亏了多少？
后面收回来可能就一半。
你还记得你投过几个项目吗？是哪几个？你还记得吗？
已经时间有点久，我可能得想一下，因为那时候脑子里就有一个想法，这个圈子这么火热。就是等着拉盘，脑子里只有想着一根大阳线没了，你根本这个行业对你要投资的东西没有任何的了解，听别人说，然后币价涨了你就觉得它好啊，看到它涨你就要买，然后买完之后它回调你就觉得啊不行了，我要那个抛，我要割，结果你割完之后人家又开始涨啊，我又追进去，这就是韭菜。那时候对这些完全没什么概念，有的根本就没项目，就币打给他，去哪里都不知道了，团队公告也没有，什么就没了，有的都不见了，反正很多都没有消息的，就是这样。
Over 400 years ago, during the European Age of Discovery, in order to further expand overseas business opportunities, the Dutch East India Company decided to issue bonds and shares of stock to the general public. This is the first company in history to do an initial public offering, IPO, which created a capital operation model that has continued until today. Today, after 400 years, various ICO projects raise funds from investors by issuing various tokens. What do these tokens represent? What are their values?
When you own a part of a pre-IPO company, you actually own private equity in a company. But if you own a pre-ICO, if you own a SAFT agreement, you own nothing, zero.
There is indeed a question whether you need to protect the customer at all beyond just clarifying what the token actually is and making clear in the terms and conditions what he's entering into.
There are two common types of tokens in an ICO. One is called the utility token, which gives investors access to the project's products and services.
Most of the ICO activity over the past year or two has been driven largely by utility token offerings. You use them to get access to certain services or products through an application. So in a way, what they're doing is selling something of a hybrid.
Most of them are going to fail because companies are issuing utility tokens without having mathematical models to tell us what the value of this utility is actually going to be.
Another type is called the security token, which is derived from an external tradable asset. However, its legitimacy is yet to be proven.
By the very nature, blockchain can be anonymous. In this country, in many developed countries, you can't have anonymous securities or bearer bonds, for example, because you have to keep track of your tax filings.
People would try to buy and invest in ICOs for the expectation of a high return. Can they get it?
So how do investors get the returns they expect from the ICOs?
They have to get their tokens listed on exchanges.
其实大家拿到这些新币啊，就是 ICO 发的这些新的币种，就是等着上交易所。那时候一些交易所，无论是知名的或者不知名的，每天都会上很多种币，而且这种币都是很疯狂的涨幅，很疯狂的涨势，比你买比特币，比你买一些主流币、买现货，那涨得多得多，你肯定要被吸引的，因为你觉得你投的币也会像他们这样子，你1块钱投进去也会变成5块、6块、7块这样子，但是你看到的，你再去参加，你已经晚了，你不知道背后是不是有人真的有在操纵。
Whenever a coin gets listed, there's a huge demand for it. The price goes up a lot. ICO tokens, they raise a lot of money, right? So they have money to pay for listing. So these exchanges definitely it's another source of revenue for them to charge for listing.
你怎么去在这个交易所去上线？有的平台会采取社区投票的形式，有的平台会采取这个专业的投资人，那么来进行投票的形式那么有的平台可能会采取谈判可能类目等等。
Hello, hey, Bianca.
Hey,
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Let's sit here. How much do I have to pay if I want to list my coin token?
We don't have a set fee. We ask projects to propose a fee. I've not seen a single project saying our fee is too high and not willing to list. All of them are willing to pay the fee to list.
A lot of people are criticizing exchange to charge them a high fee to get listed.
Google's making a lot of money, but nobody's complaining about them. I think at the end of the day, it's what value do you provide? None of the tokens we listed complain about our fees being too high. The only guys you hear complaining our fees being too high, actually not because the ones that we charged, it's the ones we rejected, or we would just say we don't list. So the fee is not the issue.
Binance successfully launched the first ICO for a cryptocurrency exchange in June 2017. Founder CZ shared their ICO experience with us.
The trigger was June 14th. I went to one of the potluck dinners in Chengdu, organized by Chandler Guo. So a bunch of other guys were there, and everyone's telling me you should do an ICO. And I said, okay, we're gonna do an ICO.
So what happened in that short period of preparing for ICO?
It was very hectic, actually. Yeah. From June 15th, midnight, early midnight, we started writing. I think by June 17th or 18th, we had a draft. And then we started asking, I sent it out to about 20 people saying, hey, can you be my advisor? So Matt Rosick was one of them. Roger Ver was another one of them. And to my surprise, all of them just replied very quickly and said, yes, just sure, why not? And so our advisor page was pretty long.
注意力就代表资金的进入，然后以及代表财富的兑现。先有网红，然后有流量，然后发币，然后迅速流量变现，这就是叫割韭菜。
那你当时是通过哪些渠道去了解到这些项目的？
主要是群里一些朋友推荐。
所以是微信群是吧？
微信群、QQ 群都有。有的刚开始说，有个好的项目，一些个人发的一些好的项目，最近要上哪个交易所，让大家关注。
这个圈内有很多所谓的这种红人，这些人是怎么去宣传的？
比如说像李笑来，他之前已经为了很多项目去展开，他主动的或者被动的，谁知道是真是假的？他自己也从来不主动澄清啊。
那些大佬呢？从他们所谓的金玉良言当中，有帮到你们韭菜真正的赚到钱吗？
他们只会讲一些模棱两可的话，他们应该知道，已经想到最坏的结果出现的时候，他要怎么圆了。他的话基本上密不透风，很多时候他们已经被打脸了，那你又能怎么样呢？你的钱已经在他们口袋里啊，就是这样子。
Private sale was interesting. It's like, okay, we now have a private sale, we're giving 20% discount. Do you want some? So now people have to put money in.
Yeah.
And then the reaction is quite interesting. Some people put money in very, very quickly. Some people kind of drag their feet. We closed $3 million in about 24 hours.
Which day was that?
June 19th or 20th. And then I think on June 22nd is the first day we did the public sale. On June 22nd, we said the first 10,000 people to register will get a certain allocation.
I see.
Because everybody's trying to grab it, and it's going to be
some discount.
Yeah. And then by July 2nd, we raised everything. We reached $50 million.
There are so many hidden rules in the ICO game. Prior to the public sale, investment institutions and industry giants would receive pre-sale discounts. Even if the token's transaction price were to fall below the issue price, they would still earn a profit. The project teams would usually hold a certain number of tokens. A lot of teams would sell them off on the market for profit. As for the funds raised through the ICO, one portion would be used to pay for the exchange's listing fee. Another portion would be spent on promotion in the community as a way to attract more participation from investors. After getting listed on the exchanges, the team would also take from the funds to support the market and the token price. As a result, in the end, there's very little money left for actual product development. It is destined to fail once you get to any form of long-term development. Finally, the price goes down, bursting the dreams of the naive speculators.
The ICO craze is really a manifestation of the public's desire to get into the VC game far earlier than they've been getting. By the time they get in, all the profits have been squeezed out of the system.
People are being misled, right? People are investing their hard-earned money into scams because it looks good on the outside.
And as a techie, you look at them and you're like, that is not going to work at all. And the public can't see that. They lack the domain knowledge to be able to say, this particular set of ideas don't hold well together, or sometimes it's just technobabble.
其实我觉得整个币圈最不负责任的，其实是一些媒体，真的太无良了。一些利好利空都没有经过一些求证，不知道谁家交易所出了什么事情，被黑客攻击了，马上发出来，结果人家交易所说我没有事啊，
所以就会造成这个币价波动。
是啊，就是你发利空，人家马上就抛。赶紧把所有的币清掉，你就无形之中，你一下子被割了。
As a fundraising method, ICO is different from IPO in that it doesn't need due diligence, approvals from securities regulatory commissions, or multiple layers of approval by other regulatory authorities. In order to increase credibility, ICO projects will generally bring in a nonprofit, independent third-party organization, such as a foundation, to manage and monitor the fundraising activities.
The foundation doesn't become a bottleneck, right? Micromanaging does not fare well with this this type of software, development model.
The foundation has 3 trustees. Who are in charge of the foundation, and every single penny that's spent by the foundation needs to be voted at by the 3 trustees. Well, part of the issues that we had is that we were running this pretty agile company, but the foundation was supposed to take over a lot of these tasks. I don't think they executed as well as they could on taking over these tasks. We sat down with the rest of the foundation council, and we came up with a structure that was voted by the foundation that they prefer. And I think one of them was not a really good fit for the project and made some mistakes. And we brought those mistakes to the council, who looked into them and is taking appropriate action. That was very regrettable that it happened.
Did the company get any money out of the fundraising?
Not yet. So we have a contract with the foundation where the foundation will acquire our company, but only after the network launches and if the network works correctly.
How will the money be used from the fundraising?
Well, that's really up to the foundation council to decide, because ultimately there's the trustees who determine how the funds are used.
Many people in the blockchain industry are thinking about how to change the fund's governance problem that hobbles the ICO model. When Matthew and Jeff designed Metronome, they proposed their idea of using decentralized smart contract software instead of having it managed by a group of individuals or institutions.
First and foremost, it's autonomous. It means when you launch it, it works, and there's no intervention by anybody, including Block or Jeff or anybody else involved, has no further kind of input in the way it operates. And I think autonomous networks, if you fast forward this movie, will be some of the most powerful and valuable layers of this new blockchain future.
This is a new currency that, just like the Federal Reserve introduces new currency every day, every month into the US money supply, we've created something where no one is in control. And so it's truly an autonomous entity, organism.
They were completely transparent that, this is a new cryptocurrency. And we think it's better than other cryptocurrencies based on a few new features. No money is being raised to the team. All the proceeds from the auction sits in this autonomous contract, and then it's sort of backing the cryptocurrency. And to me, that was a pretty cool design. But this is up to the market to decide.
The ICO market is in chaos. The industry is calling for regulation. The media is calling for regulation. The investors are also calling for regulation. But who should regulate? Regulate what? And how to regulate? None of these questions can be easily answered by government officials. In 2017, Swiss-based ICOs raised over $550 million in funding, which was about 14% of the global ICO market. MME is the legal firm behind the Ethereum ICO. In recent years, they have been constantly providing suggestions to the Swiss government regarding blockchain and cryptocurrency regulation.
FINMA published the guidance for ICO in February. Could you tell a little bit what it is about and what's the purpose of setting that up?
FINMA in February 18 then launched this ICO guidelines, as they call that. From the content, FINMA looks at this from a very regulatory perspective, having looked at the ICO world and having decided that they mainly are concerned about two types of regulation, which is security and AML prevention, or AML regulations. It distinguishes between three token types coming from a regulatory considerations. One being an asset token, so that's where security regulations would apply. One being a so-called payment token, where AML regulations are being triggered, and one being the utility token, where no regulations are being triggered. Obviously, you still have to be careful that you don't touch the application of banking regulations or collective investment schemes, etc.
Do you think what do you think about the guidance? Do you think
what FINMA tries to do is find a balance to keep the Swiss brand in the financial market stable and strong, and thus really look at things carefully and be to a certain extent a bit conservative.
No matter whether it's complete prohibition, a strictly controlled environment, or an environment that is hard to maneuver in based on existing regulations, every government seems to have all kinds of concerns and hesitates to take a stance.
Those regulators are the SEC or the CFTC. They worry about unsophisticated investors being convinced to buy very volatile or speculative assets and then getting hurt. And they want the right disclosures.
I think the real motivation behind that is to protect the entrenched interests of the venture capital world. You know, I think there's all of these invested interests who lose if the whole world moves into cryptocurrency for fundraising or for anything else for that matter. And those people are starting to take notice that their world is going to fall apart.
The irony is that the regulators are likely to entrench the current system of capital raising, because if they essentially outlaw ICOs, then they're basically putting us in business for the long term.
The last area I would say is tax policy.
If more and more people start using cryptocurrencies, as taxes become really hard to collect, this is an existential threat to the government, of every government.
The tax sort of regulatory requirements from the IRS, etc., are still sort of evolving. I think the IRS treats this as a property, but companies, of course, have questions about how different types of coins, how different companies who hold these coins on their balance sheet, how all of those are treated from an accounting perspective.
When you're launching a project like this, we're very, cautious, but it's kind of, in many ways, we feel like we're making some history here for the ecosystem. And I think that dialogue and that energy will continue to evolve with Metronome, beyond Metronome. We have a lot of work to do as an industry.
No one has ever anticipated that the concept of the ICO that everyone was once so dismissive of has brought about such a drastic impact. In front of innovation, forward-thinking individuals can see its potential to change the world. The greedy pick up the opportunity to make a fortune overnight. But this wave, full of risk and uncertainty, might not belong to us, the ordinary investors, because of the mechanism's immaturity and difficulties when it comes to regulations. It's hard for us to remain optimistic about the ICO model. However, during the rise of any new technology, it is inevitable that it will go through a period of trial and error, and then slowly build the infrastructure, get people to understand, buy into the technical concepts, and make the regulation more effective. Blockchain is just one example. We have a long way ahead. A rising ecosystem is gradually maturing amid the chaos. The clouds will eventually clear away. With more untold stories discovered, our blockchain journey will embark onto the next chapter.
澳洲的金融监管机构不认为数字货币是资产，
所以你把它告上了法庭。
对。
你后来赢了吗？
我们赢了。现实的这个框架已经够好的，但现在缺的是更多的人来加入和参与。那通过什么样方式来让他们参与呢？
UNICEF as an organization works in 135 countries around the world and has more than 12,000 staff who are dedicated to solving problems for children. And these are problems of education, access to information, and healthcare, and how people deal with the world after an emergency. We live in a world where if you're poor, if you're disconnected from a system, you don't have access to the type of information that we take for granted. And in fact, a third of kids in the world have no birth registration. They don't exist in a formal system. There are 60 million children on the move right now because of war or violence. So 60 million kids who have no home, no government that they're attached to. And those are types of problems that information can help us solve if we know where young people are, if we know what their needs are. And if we can do that with fluidity that's not bound to a national border, if we think about an application of a distributed ledger technology that could allow us to understand information better, to have more transparency, or to create systems that are fundamentally decentralized but accessible, those are things that we think can empower UNICEF and the governments that we work with to do our job better.